I'm on mute now. I thought I had a heart attack now. Everything was just turning around and in my
My mom taught me to sell at a spaza shop. She ran a hair salon. I pretty much learned entrepreneurship from my mom's.
Umntu ngumntu ngabantu. That on your own, you can't really do it. You need the support of those around you.
You will have a network of people, a network of communities, and a society that will make sure that you count.
Good evening and a very, very warm welcome, and thank you for joining us on the SAITA Media Facebook page for this evening's edition of SAITA StraightTalk. The SAITA StraightTalk panel discussion series is brought to you by the South African Informal Traders Alliance, or SAITA, that is the national voice of the informal sector in South Africa. We like to call it one sector, one voice. And when we say one sector, one voice, it means that there are a lot of things that we are going to be having seriously robust discussions about. Some of them we'll see eye to eye. Some of them we might agree to disagree. Some of them we might leave each other and not speak to each other for a while. And others we'll be celebrating because it's just such a wonderful achievement. I promise you that in every edition of SAITA StraightTalk, we touch on valid issues that touch the informal sector, and I also promise you that we discuss these with specialists within the sector. Tonight is no different. Tonight we are going to be talking about what some would deem a very, very sensitive topic. I deem it a topic that is worthy of robust discussion because when we sort this out, we can all benefit. And that is a topic about foreign traders, especially within the informal sector. Good evening to all our panelists, and I'd like you to just greet our audience one by one. Pat Horn, good evening and welcome.
Good evening to everybody. I'm Pat Horn from WeGo, responsible for collective bargaining in the informal economy.
Thank you, Pat. We've also got Prince. Prince, good evening and welcome to SAITA StraightTalk.
Thank you very much. My name is Prince Ibe. I've been in the country since 2005, and I've been in the informal sector throughout the whole period, and I'm glad to be on the panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much for availing yourself. We've also got from the Department of Small Business Development, Mr. Stephen Omlau. Good evening, Stephen, and welcome.
Hi, good evening, and thank you for having me on your show again. It's a wonderful platform. It's always great to be here and interacting. I am from the Department of Small Business Development, and my focus area is in enterprise development, specifically in the informal economy. Well, I've been in this environment for more than 30 years. But thank you again.
Thank you, Stephen. And last but certainly not least, Madam Rashida Muller, the National President of SAITA. Good evening, ma'am, and welcome.
Good evening, Louise, and good evening to the panelists and to all those who are tuned in.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm going to start off by directing my first, I don't know if it's a comment or a statement to you, but being the leader of a national body like SAITA that represents informal traders with a vast difference of opinions, political views, and how we live our lives. I need you to set the scene from a SAITA point of view with regards to what our feelings are when it comes to xenophobic attacks against foreigners, particularly in our marketplaces, in our communities with spaza. For me.
Well, yes, it's not a new topic. and the recent xenophobic incidents we have witnessed on our TV screens and on the social media platforms should concern every progressive thinking person in South Africa. I want to make this very clear. SAITA distances itself from all and any practices of discrimination based on race, gender, sexual orientation, and national identification status. SAITA's constitution is based on inclusivity, and as such, our mandate, among others, is to provide a voice for the informal workers nationally to ensure that their rights are protected and to assist in providing opportunities for their growth and development. Yes, there are many foreign based workers within our ranks. Some have been here for many, many years, as you've heard what Prince has said there. These are our colleagues, bread and butter traders who trade side by side with locals in their never ending battle to survive. Who gives anybody the right to harass and psychologically torment our people, our colleagues? Let it be known that SAITA is not a policing agency, nor is it an arm of Home Affairs. It is a movement created by informal businesses and acts in the interests of its constituency. As a leader in job creation, our prime focus is to encourage and support local entrepreneurship.
Thank you, Rashida. That sets the scene quite nicely. I'm going to come back to you in a little while because I want to probe that a little bit more. I want to move on to Pat. Pat, you have a global view in terms of your workings within WeGo and StreetNet International. I'm going to ask you two questions. The one is what is happening in South Africa a unique phenomenon? And number two is how does this and what is happening fall within the spheres of the Do No Harm campaign? Because that's quite a big portion of how we want informal traders to be treated.
So good evening. So Louise and everybody who's listening. The issue of the kind of vigilante attacks that we've seen recently against non-South African informal traders, it's a type of discrimination which happens in many parts of the world. You get discrimination against migrants in many parts of the world. That is the reason why the International Labour Organization, which protects the labor rights of everybody, does not accept that there's such a concept of an illegal worker. Because when a person is working in a country, whether in the formal economy or the informal economy, whether they are documented or not, which is a different issue, but they are not an illegal worker and they have rights as workers. So that applies to the truck drivers where we are seeing these kinds of issues happening, who are employed by formal employers, and it also applies to informal workers, like informal traders. So the issue of discrimination against migrants is a problem in many countries. It's worse in some countries than others, and maybe South Africa is one of the countries that's worse than many others. But if you look at what's been happening in Europe, there's a lot of xenophobia in most of Europe and discrimination against migrants. So discrimination against migrants and othering of people who come from other parts of the world is something which many countries have to deal with, especially, where people haven't really come to terms with the fact that we live in a global world where migration is a fact of life, and there's lots and lots and lots of information about that. So the second part of your question the Do No Harm campaign that SAITA has adopted, and informal traders generally and other informal workers have adopted. It's to basically put forward a method of dealing with this. And it's through promoting regulation through dialogue and negotiation, not punitive regulation. And our problem is we come from many years of punitive regulation. You may not do this, you may not do that, you may not do that. The South African Constitution, however, which protects the rights of all who live and work in South Africa. If all of our authorities were to follow the Constitution of South Africa, we would have a lot less of these problems. Some people are still struggling to get used to our progressive Constitution. And what it means is equal treatment, and it means non-violence. So SAITA's proposal to all municipalities of enforcing a 10% quota for non-South African traders, that is a very sensible proposal. It's a proposal in line with Do No Harm, but it's also something which is informed by statistics, because all the statistics and studies that have shown roughly what is the proportion of non-South Africans compared to South African traders, it ranges in most cities between 5 and 10%, actually. I'm talking about cities as a whole. You may have a certain area where you have a different proportion, but in the city as a whole. So SAITA has come up with something which I think the issue that we're facing now is maybe it needs to be pushed a little bit more strongly, especially now that we're seeing all this vigilantism emerging that we've been seeing lately, from the Operation Dudula in Soweto, from the so-called Soweto Parliament. We also heard from Mangaung there was a threat on the 19th of January, although I didn't see if anything happened on that date. But it's SAITA's approach of developing a proposal which is an alternative, I think, is a very important thing. Also, SALGA, as the authority that represents all the cities, has actually taken measures to ensure they've adopted some public space trading guidelines in which they urge municipalities to abide by the Constitution. And they very clearly talk about the issue of relationships with non-South African traders as part of that, because part of what we've been seeing is municipal authorities ignoring the Constitution, and SALGA is doing their best to address the situation by ensuring that they do abide by the Constitution, because in fact, abiding by our Constitution is going to get us very far. I'll talk more about some of the practical elements of that, but that's just the framework.
Thank you for the clarity there, Pat. Your last part of what you've just said it is quite interesting with regards to the municipalities, because in a couple of visits to markets, we've heard quite the opposite, where we've heard that some of the municipalities are actually not giving South Africans a chance to trade, but are more prone to giving foreigners a trading space. And I suppose that all depends on what your vantage point is, because with any argument, we will have different viewpoints. Prince, I want to come to you now, and I want you to please just tell us your story. Tell us how long you've been here. Tell us what you're doing, what got you into the informal trade, and what has your experience been as an informal trader within the framework of the regulations that are well, you trade in Cape Town. So talk to us about what your experience is. Oh, and their Prince has just fallen off the feed. Okay, I'm going to carry on by saying to Stephen, we'll go back to Prince as soon as he's back online. But Stephen, as the Department of Small Business Development, that must pose a very, very interesting point of discussion when you guys sit around the boardroom table, because Just how do you cater and make sure that the South African Constitution that gives all people the right to live and work, how do you cater for our colleagues that are non-South African?
Thank you, Louise, and greetings again. A very interesting topic tonight and very complex. And just listening to President Rashida and Dr. Pat Horn, already you can tell that there is a lot of complexity. But from the perspective of one government department, and by the way, the complexity requires that we should look at the matters at hand from the perspective of several government departments, as well as other role players within the space in which it happens. But if I were to limit it for now to the department, what we do as a department is always driven by our mandate as a department, what we have been established to do.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we did in the process of strengthening the work of the department in supporting small, medium enterprises, cooperatives, and formal businesses was to begin to understand the businesses themselves. Who are these businesses and how are they diversified? Informal businesses, and I'm sure President Rashida could say a lot more about them. She has been leading an organization whose formation and its essence is informal businesses. But our own analysis in terms of developing a strategy to deal with the support for informal businesses took into account the existence of foreign traders, as it were. And we knew that there would be issues that needed to be addressed, but ours was a very positive approach. And this, again, is the line of all of government, that if they are legally within the country, operating within the law, then they should be in a position to receive assistance from organs of state and other role players within the country. But then we had to distinguish the kind of support in terms of what do we do for informal businesses as a whole. And we realized that we have to uplift local businesses to bring them to par with other competitors within the informal economy space. But then what about the foreign businesses that are operating? And I will use the terms very casually to say foreign businesses, meaning businesses owned by foreign nationals. But I'll call these foreign businesses, in this case, let's call them foreign traders. We said we should encourage things like partnerships and collaboration and working together. Again, that's a very positive approach to what could be a very complex understanding of the informal business environment. And then we said we will always need to have regulations to oversee all the interactions within the space of trade and business activity. So those three really were the cornerstones of our starting point, to say uplift the locals, encourage partnerships, and introduce a regulatory environment. And so if you were to think about, Louise, I'm sure you would know that there is a Business Act that has been in place for many, many years in the country. That is being reviewed as we speak now.
Yeah.
The Business Act is being reviewed mainly to take into account the fact that there are so many businesses operating legally, although they are owned by foreign nationals. And so the Business Act will begin to address that area of the gaps that have been identified in that area, to say, here are the businesses already operating legally within the country. What regulations should apply? And there will be, therefore, a series of announcements in terms of the legislation in that regard. Again, I must emphasize that the approach is a very positive approach, but there is caution that it has to be a framework that is driven by compliance with the legal statutes, the constitutional drivers within the country. Let me pause there for now, Louise, and I'm hoping that I'll get a chance to add more to this.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. Your comment has triggered a number of questions in my mind. However, I do want to welcome Robert Zokali. Welcome to SAITA StraightTalk, and thank you for joining us. Please, will you just introduce yourself, and then can you give us a snapshot view of what your experience as a foreign trader has been in South Africa?
I'm sorry for coming in a little bit late. I'm not so much used to the broadcast, but I would like to add a couple things. First of all, I totally believe that the issue of foreign nationals, it really has to be addressed. One of the most important things, understand the type of foreign nationals that are in South Africa, because I've been following on Twitter, on Facebook, and all news platforms where everybody is saying illegal foreigners. I mean, that is wrong. We need to identify the types of foreigners that can be able to do business, whether formal or informal, in South Africa. And I believe the majority of the people have no idea about the different types of visas that are issued by Home Affairs. It's very easy to, I know that Home Affairs is not really perfect from experience, but I also know that there's so many people with different permits are allowed, that are allowed into the mainstream of the South African society. And that is one of the things that we need to exercise. There is the Zimbabwe dispensation permit, there's the Lesotho dispensation permit, and then there's asylum seeker permit, and then the refugee permit. And then, because when you hear the people, especially on social media, most of them have no idea about the different types of foreign nationals that are doing business in South Africa. So it's very important that we emphasize. My colleague, I think it's Stephen, he actually raised a very valid point we should be able to incorporate all of them. I mean, all those that are legally in the country. We cannot ignore the fact that there are so many other foreign nationals who are in the country doing business, especially those from the neighboring countries, and they've not actually bothered to get their documents sorted out. So in the end, it's really going to cause a lot of commotion among traders. But once we can be able to clear out and to ensure people know that so many of the foreign nationals that are doing business are legally in the country, it would be a first step that we can be able to take.
Kali, your signal is not very stable. I'm going to ask you if you don't want to just switch your camera off so that we can hear you, but we won't see you, because that often helps to just stabilize the signal.
Okay.
Rashida, I'm going to ask you, based on what Kali has just said, how does that make you feel? Because as the head of SAITA, there's now two things. We're talking about different kinds of permits that allows people to work. But Kali has made it very clear and said, but he also draws a distinction by somebody that's not bothered to make sure that their legal documentation to be in the country is in order. So where does SAITA stand in all of that? Does SAITA, or is SAITA in a position to gather role players around the table and offer a solution?
Absolutely, Louise, absolutely. I think that is a crux of a big part of the struggle that we're going through at the moment. The regulatory framework And for this, I'm glad that we have Stephen here tonight from the Department of Small Business Development. You see, the informal trader, first point of call is the landlord, and the landlord is no one else but the municipality. And in many cases, there isn't this open door policy where the informal traders can openly engage with municipalities. And I think we are very happy that Salga has brought up public space trading guidelines for local government, which is in a draft form, and SAITA will be commenting, putting submissions into it. But what should happen to alleviate the current crisis and stresses that is around the different provinces is the fact that the round table in Davos must take place. And it's important that national government is in the room when we speak to the local governments, because often local government does not implement the regulatory framework that is in place. Like our comrade said there, that they are different. And even as the chairperson of the Grand Parade, we have many foreign traders with us. Some have a business passport. Some of them have asylum seeking status. Some of them have refugee status. And we as an organization, when they do become a trader on our market, we ensure that that is in place. And that is for conformity and regulatory, for those reasons. We don't want, what can I say, what can I call it, trading that, that causes friction. Because I know it happens on the borderlines, especially on the neighboring countries when they cross over and there's an impact and conflict between the local traders and the traders that has come into the borders of South Africa. And those are the things that we need to deal with. But we need to deal with it in the conforms of do no harm, in the conforms that we do need to ensure that local economic empowerment does take place, and that, as Pat has mentioned earlier, that there is definitely opportunity for the local traders, because wherever we go, there's different stats, as Pat said. If you look across the country, you'll find that mostly that the foreign traders is between 5 and 10% on the informal sector. But if you go into certain areas, like for example, this morning I had a call from one of the districts, and they are saying there's hundreds of local traders on the waiting list, whereas they see that the foreign traders outnumber them in the CBD. So that causes tension, and it's that tension that we need to address around a table and not go to violence and xenophobic attacks. That's not the way we want to operate as SAITA. We need to deal with it in a manner where we address systems by regulation and by, like we have the Do No Harm campaign, where we propose to government that we should basically 10 to 20% should be of foreign nationals, and then the majority should be the locals, based on the unemployment and the demand for the trading spaces. We also do believe that government must open up much more trading spaces, as that.
I was going to ask you that. I was going to just ask you that. Is there enough trading spaces then? If we have so many people on a waiting list that we cannot accommodate, does that mean that we are not reacting quickly enough to make sure that we're giving people the opportunity to make a living?
Yes, indeed. And this is what we need to tell government as SAITA. We need to tell them that the formal business sector cannot absorb the way and at the speed which the informal sector can. And this is only for economic growth and development. So it is important that more markets are opened, but that the regulatory framework is in place. We do want that. I'll pause.
Thank you, Rashida. Thank you, Pat. I'm gonna come to you now, because we spoke about, or you mentioned do no harm, and we spoke about the 10% quota allocation. However, we know that the perception is definitely that it's not a 10% allocation. I see a comment on the Facebook channel that says that the quotas are 98% non-South African and 2% South African. Now, within the do no harm campaign, is there an opportunity for us to change this perception? And how quickly can we do it? And just by virtue of a best case scenario, what do you think the answer would be?
Okay, so firstly, just to get back to what you mentioned earlier, the contradiction between what's actually happening on the ground and the requirements of the Constitution. So the contradiction between the high level of non-compliance with the Constitution by municipal officials and what the Constitution actually states, because you've talked about the fact that when you ask people on the ground, they tell you a different story, and that's because it is a different story on the ground. So I think firstly, the failure to follow the Constitution widespread by many, many, many different government departments has led to abuses which create more problems. And the abuses which happen create a very emotional response. So this issue of somebody who claims 98% non-South Africans, that's actual, because there's no figures you'll find in the studies that say that, but it's the emotional response. It's somebody who feels, overcome. And so that's a typical example of an emotional response. And that emotional response is what's leading to vigilantism. So the factual response and the organizational response is important. So basically, when there's a lack of compliance and a lack of equal treatment, that creates fertile ground for bribes. Then in the case of informal traders, you'll find that the people who paid the bribes are seen to be getting better treatment. In many cases, actually getting better treatment. Why? Because they paid a bribe. So the question then is, the confusion which comes up is, well, who should we attack because of that? Should we attack the people that are paying the bribes, the non-South Africans, or should we attack the municipalities or the other government departments that are doing that? And I mean, usually the line of least resistance is to attack the most vulnerable ones, not the stronger ones. Yeah. So quite a lot of bad, negative feelings towards non-South Africans is by traders that are justifiably frustrated because of a difference, but they're attacking the wrong person. And so the problem really is that it doesn't help to have different trading permits for non-South Africans and South Africans. You've already heard there's many, many different kinds of permits for citizens, for your right to be there. There's asylum seekers permits, there's refugee permits, there's passports, those are the documentation when it comes to your papers being in order. But trading permits is a different issue, and those are exactly the same for South Africans and non-South Africans. But some municipalities are refusing to give them to non-South Africans. And the minute they refuse to give them, somebody else sees an opportunity to give it in exchange for a bribe. So it doesn't help to say we won't give them to the non-South Africans. That is why it is important to have the percentage, whatever percentage you decide on. And I'm afraid to say that this figure of between 5 and 10% comes out in all the research. So the 98% one is definitely an emotional response. It's not a factual response. The problem is that with these abuses and the results that it creates, it gives rise to the emotional responses we are seeing here now. So one of the emotional responses is an exaggeration of the problem, ignoring facts and figures, not wanting to believe them. Another one is the use of provocative language, calling people illegal traders. when instead of using the word undocumented, if that's what you mean, because undocumented is a different issue. Undocumented precisely talks about persons' documents to be in a country. But the work that they're doing on the street, that is as legal as any other person's work. And that's where the ILO says there's no such thing as an illegal worker. That means there's no such thing as an illegal trader, unless the person is committing a criminal offense. Then that person will be treated like any other criminal, or so they should be. So basically, talking about illegal traders, illegal foreigners, even worse, illegal aliens, those are all very pejorative terms. They're not helpful. Talking about us and them, talking about these people, all of those which we've seen, creeping into the verbiage, shows the heightening of emotions. And then what you have is escalating complaints. We've seen this on social media, escalating complaints and lamentations. But many of the people who are complaining, it's not clear what they're actually asking for. And that is where an organization like SAITA is really important, is to direct people's unhappiness into actually making a request or a demand. So the issue about the 10%, 90%, which at least satisfies the concern of those people that feel they're being overrun. They feel there's 80% of foreigners in their area. Or I heard somebody the other day saying that Hillbrow was the only city in the world that has a majority of foreigners in it. Well, Hillbrow is not a city, it's a suburb. And it's a suburb which has a greater proportion of non-South Africans than other suburbs of Joburg. But Joburg as a whole has the same percentage as most other cities. But that kind of a statement is a sign of somebody who's very upset and disturbed because there's things that's not going right. So the thing to do is to remove from the emotional reaction that has a cause, it has a genuine cause. It's this abuse that I was talking about, failure to comply with our very good constitution and failure to comply with our, the guidelines that we have and so on. So the building up of frustration is what leads to the kind of vigilantism that we've seen, which is, as Rashida says, it's completely unacceptable. And also on scapegoating, because we've got many problems in South Africa, and at the moment we seem to be blaming non-South Africans for all of them, including all drug dealing and, hijacking and murdering and so on. And, South Africans are not short of those skills as well. So you can't really, when you start scapegoating those on non-South Africans, then you shift the discussion. So the important issue then is, and the role for an organization like SAITA, like the trade unions, for example. I was listening to an interview the other day with Zwelinzi Mavavi from SAFTU, and he was raising same issues about discrimination in the workplace against migrants, particularly in the trucking industry. And I noticed that SAFTU has the similar demand to SAITA's demand. It's proposing these quotas. The reason is because due to COVID, there's much bigger competition for resources at the moment. Resources, which is, what is in short supply for informal traders. And then the labor market, access to the labor market, because there's been retrenchments and so on. So formal sector workers are also fighting against migrants, in the same way. And SAFTU is taking the same principled, mature organizational position of putting forward demands and then trying to push really hard for those demands and putting their demands to the people that are responsible for those abuses. And I think, that's what SAITA is positioning itself to do, is to place the demands to the right places. So they will put certain demands to the Department of Small Business Development. They will put certain demands to the municipalities. And SALGA is assisting a lot with that. And SALGA's guidelines are important with that. So, the demands going to those departments and, demands still need to be put to Home Affairs because there's a lot of talk about that. And at NEDLAC, there's been an agreement that we'll have a meeting with the Minister of Employment and Labour and the Minister of Home Affairs. That won't affect so much of informal traders, and that is where we are working more closely with SALGA. So having demands that are based on fact, are based on actual, genuine statistics and not on emotions, and then in that way reporting back to the members all the time, because the members are getting more and more emotional because of the abuses that are taking place.
Yeah.
So SAITA's role is incredibly important in all of this.
Thank you, Pat. I think you've summed it up so eloquently right at the end by saying it really is about feedback. Because if I've asked a question or if I'm unhappy with something and somebody says they're listening to me but don't give me an answer, it does lead to frustration. And often emotional frustration, like you say, inevitably leads to some form of erratic behavior. Prince, before your signal went, I asked you to give us a snapshot of your life as an informal trader in South Africa. Please, can you do that for us now?
Okay, thank you. Sorry for that. It's the
okay.
network was a big problem, so I had to run away from where I was and just had to dash to somewhere else where I'll get a better signal. So that was what happened. So I'm sorry for that.
Thank you.
Okay. Like I said in the beginning, my name is Prince Ibe. I arrived South Africa sometime in 1995. At the dawn of the liberation and all that. So it was hectic in the beginning when we started. And I actually started on the streets of Cape Town, selling toys. From there to selling beach sandals, to clothing items, to bags. And steadily, I started doing just clothing. But in those time, it wasn't a very wonderful journey. It wasn't a good journey. It was difficult finding a space on the informal trade, even on the street, where you have to put your things on the floor and stand there to sell, at least to make a living. It was difficult. Being a foreigner or an immigrant, as it's called, but we persevered because we don't really have other alternative. Seeking employment with my degree does not help me at that point in time. So I have not been into business all my life. I came to South Africa because of the political issue in my country. And the only way to survive is to start on the street, trying to see how to survive. And the only way is starting from the informal sector, because with the little money I have with me, that's the only place I can start with. So I started there. It was difficult. You get called names, you get treated badly. And at a time, I even got death threats. I got people who paid some people to come and kill me because I refused to move from where they were threatening for me to move from. And at a time, the people that paid to come and kill me, they came to my stand and I wasn't there. And that was how I escaped it. So, but anyway, that's a long story. And so this problem of foreigners, they call you illegal immigrants. The problem is most of the people, they don't understand who is legal and who is illegal. And they don't even know the difference between legal and illegal. So you get branded illegal immigrant or illegal foreigner just because you are a foreigner, you come from another country. So you deal with that stigma all your life, and you get called names, you get threatened and all that. So, but having said that, you need to make a living, you need to survive and all that. So, and that was my journey. And I moved from there. I graduated into finding a space with Rashida Mullah, who is the SAITA president, when she was in charge of Greenpoint Flea Market. And I didn't have much of a problem with her because she absorbed us into the market, gave us store every Sunday. We traded, but during the week, we struggled other places. Until then, she became part of the lower deck flea market on Cape Town Station. And she also gave us space, absorbed us, and we become part of the association on the lower deck Cape Town station. And we grew from there, and most of us have survived, doing okay in our trade. And yeah, that is my story. And
Prince,
so far, so, yes.
Yeah, Prince, I want to interrupt you because, you know, our other panelist who seems to have had signal trouble as well is also a non-South African trader. And he mentioned the different kinds of permits that are available. But he also said that even for a foreign national with a permit, people that are not making the effort to legalize their documents to be in South Africa legally is even a problem for somebody like you, because obviously people like those put your life in danger, puts your livelihood in danger. Do you have a possible solution to this? Because how do you compete with somebody that really is undocumented in the country, taking on and wanting the same space as you do in order to make a living?
Okay. Yeah, that is also a problem. But then when you talk about the documented and the undocumented, we need to understand that like some of us that arrived much earlier, it was a little bit, not quite easy. It was a little bit easier for us to get our documentation. And those who are undocumented, we also need to understand that it is not their will or their intention to remain undocumented. I know some of them that is trying, going to Home Affairs, trying to get their documents in, but it's been very difficult. So, but either way, I'm not blaming them completely, and I'm not blaming Home Affairs completely, but just to make this point, I just need to make this point to state that our leaders in Africa need to take responsibility for a change on what is happening.
So there's an echo now.
Just to make this point, I just need to make this point to state that
I'm not sure why there's an echo on your side.
I've got no idea.
That's very, very interesting. It's never happened before where your own voice gets played back to you immediately. But I think it's quite now. Let's try again. I'm very interested to hear what your answer is.
Okay, is it better now?
Yes.
Okay, like as I'm saying, that irrespective of the fact that some are legal, some are illegal, and we are all struggling for the same space, it is not those who are undocumented. I've seen most of them that is struggling on a daily basis to get documented. But then it's just because, from what I understand, the Home Affairs is also overwhelmed by this whole issue of getting everybody documented. And in thereby, so many people get lost in the system of being undocumented, because then they get tired of trying.
I'm interested to hear your comment around the leadership of in Africa.
Okay. Now, what I'm trying to get at is, in as much as we are talking about immigrants, whether legal or illegal immigrants, our leaders in Africa, our president and all our leaders in Africa need to take responsibility for what is happening in Africa, the migration in Africa. Our leaders need to take full responsibility for that. Instead of playing citizens against each other, playing African brothers against other African brothers, our leaders, instead of sitting in their cozy environment and trying to use the masses to play this game of politics or whatever it is among each other, they need to take responsibility, knowing that they are the reason why this is happening. I heard Julius Malema talking about borderless Africa. But I believe in what he's saying, but borderless Africa is not the problem. It's not how to solve the problem. The problem is our leaders in Africa are too caught up in their own self-enrichment without trying to fix the problem in individual countries. Now, if the country where I come from, there's a big a political problem where the leaders are siphoning the money and killing the economy and not making their citizens enjoy what is due to them in the country. Now, the neighboring country, knowing what the other leader is doing, instead of trying to call them to order and say, listen, if you don't fix your house, this thing will spill over in my own house. And then I will start to suffer the brunt of what you are not doing. But all of them are busy protecting each other instead of talking to one another for everybody to put their houses in order so that others doesn't suffer. If we have a borderless Africa, and then South Africa becomes the only country where the leaders are taking care of their citizens and the infrastructure, and every other 10 African countries flow into this place, it will be difficult for the government of South Africa to manage everybody that is coming in. But if every African president and leaders stop being selfish and stop doing what they are doing, and every African leader hold each other to account to be sure of what is going on in their own country, we will not be having this problem that we're having. So that is my take on that. So we can talk about borderless Africa as much as we want to talk about it, but it will not solve the problem if somebody is not taking care of their own house, and then his problem is spilling over to somebody else's house. So I don't really blame South Africans for crying the way they are doing, but South African government should also be responsible for not speaking to their neighbors and playing games with them because we don't want to hurt their feelings, and thereby letting their problem spill over to this side. So that is what is happening in the continent of Africa. The leaders don't want to hold each other to account, and everybody is in their own corner. And that is why all of us are suffering the way we are suffering.
Prince Ibe.
Strong words, strong opinion. Thank you, Prince. That is really, really food for thought. Stephen, I want to draw you back into the conversation, because as a government agency and a government department, do you think there's room for us to include, like for example, the Department of Home Affairs, to try and streamline processes so that people can be documented, and therefore then, so that people, the stigma around being illegal is taken away, so that we all just become business people trying to make the South African economy flourish. Is there an opportunity like that, or are we, or is what is being planned now with the Department of Employment and Labour, and the National Labour Migration Policies, and what they're planning to do to the Employment Service Act, is that really the extent of where we can affect change? But it feels to me that we're disregarding the informal sector yet again.
Yeah, sorry, Louis, I lost you a bit there, but I could pick up a bit about how intergovernmentally we could be looking at the multitude of challenges. Particularly, I did pick up, you mentioned Home Affairs as one of the departments. There has been a lot of work that has been done intergovernmentally, because what affects one department also requires another department to play a role. But I won't go into that detail. Hello, I can hear some sound in the background.
Yeah, Pat, if you could just mute yourself, please. Okay,
can I continue?
Yeah, yes, please.
I'll try and be very brief. A lot of intergovernmental collaboration is taking place constantly to try and address the multifaceted nature of some of these challenges. But from one government department's perspective, which is the Department of Small Business Development, I mentioned earlier that there had been some approaches that were recommended to dealing with that part of the issue that has to do with the informal businesses specifically. And I mentioned the three areas, which was the area of upliftment of local traders, possible partnership between local traders and traders that are coming from other countries, to find specific areas where they could collaborate. And there are many. When we start exploring areas of trade, inter-Africa trade, in the case of those that are coming from within the continent, then you would see the amount of opportunity that begins to open up. Cross-border trade issues where there could be partnerships and collaborations. Again, I'm not specifically here talking about those that fall outside of the law, the lawlessness that happens within the space. That is dealt with elsewhere by a different government department. And then there's the whole area of legislation. I spoke about the Business Act that will be reviewed. I think the role of SAITA and similar organizations that represent informal businesses, informal traders, and so forth, should have constant conversations with the legislators, both at municipal level and upwards, to fine-tune some of these proposed legislations, so that what comes out at the end is what will be most effective in developing a developmental environment. In other words, a responsive kind of legislation that says these are the issues that we are confronted with. Pat Horn has painted a very beautiful picture of the reality that is faced on a daily basis by many traders. And we therefore need to have these consultative engagements that says we need to change the legislation here, there, and there. How would it work best for all? Again, the issue of lawlessness is, I think, what we are facing right now. I don't believe that this is just a random upheaval of people being disgruntled and unhappy. But within that, there are other factors at play, things that have been mentioned already. And then there will be the whole area of support for those foreign traders who are operating in the space, who need to be introduced to the South African way of doing business within those spaces, so that there is issues of compliance with certain legislation. There are issues of access to certain support provisions for foreign nationals that have been put in place by not necessarily this department that I represent, but from the department's point of view, our role really is to assist those traders that are identified as South African, to bring them up to speed so that they can also have a fair chance of operating in the environment, not to the disregard of those foreign traders that are properly documented and are recognized as having the right to operate. I think what is interesting was what Prince was raising, that there are many layers of being a foreigner operating in a space. There are those with the documents that are legally in the country, if one were to use those terms. And then there are those that are undocumented, that are operating in the space. And then there are the local operators. Then there's the officials who tend to play a role, whether positive or negative. And this is the multifaceted nature of the environment that we are dealing with. I think the best thing that we can ever do is what we are doing right now, to have these conversations and to start raising these issues and come up with positive and responsive solutions to some of these problems that we are identifying. These are challenges, but they can be overcome. Thank you, Louise.
Thank you, Stephen. You've wrapped it around together so beautifully there. I mean, I'm going to use those as your closing words, because it just expresses so succinctly from where the Department of Small Business Development stands and what the next steps should be. Kali, because of your signal, you haven't been able to contribute as much as I would have liked you to. But could you maybe in 30 seconds just give us some last words in terms of what you would see would be a great solution to this problem? Kali, are you there? Can you hear me? Okay, not. Prince, would you be able to answer that question for me, please? What, just in terms of summing up, what would your suggestion be going forward? Now, I think Prince's signal has also gone stuck. Pat, can you hear me? Nope.
Can you hear me?
Prince, now I can. Now I can hear you. Yes, can you answer that question for me, please?
Okay.
Has also gone stuck. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay, Pat Prince is back on with us. I just want to give Prince an opportunity.
I'm managing with two gadgets.
Okay.
Yes, I'd like to thank SAITA for organizing this discussion. I agree with Steve.
Okay, you've just muted yourself, Pat. Pat, you've muted yourself. Prince, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Please, will you continue and give me your suggestion while we wait on Pat to come back?
Okay.
Yes, I muted myself on purpose. Okay, so thank you very much, SAITA. Do you hear me?
I can. Sorry, Prince, let's just give Pat an opportunity to finish.
Thanks very much to SAITA for organizing this discussion. We're going to be having a monthly meeting that we have with the informal traders around the country on Sunday. And then what I would like to suggest is that we maybe fast track the implementation of the do no harm demands, and with a particular emphasis on this one about the quotas. And we need to fast track that in as many cities as possible. I think all the authorities must hear from members on the ground, every place. The question of opening up more space. Of course, the reason we need more space is not because of how many non-South Africans are. It's because of COVID throwing so many people out of the labor market that more people have joined the informal economy. So more space is now needed. It's not really a nationality issue. It's because of what's happened to the labor market. And the SALGA guidelines, the public space guidelines, have a whole final section on the issue of how to make more space available. That definitely needs to be one of the demands, because competition over space is one of the problems. Not the only one. So I'd like to suggest to SAITA, let's work together on really strengthening and fast-tracking the implementation of those demands that we already have as an organization. But we maybe focus canes around trying to get them implemented and get people's energies put in a positive direction.
Thank you. Thank you, Pat. Prince, your response now, please.
Okay, just quickly, I just want to reiterate from what Stephen said, which makes a lot of sense, because it's part of what over the years I've actually been talking about, which is kind of, I forgot the word that Stephen used, interlinking the foreign traders with the local traders. A kind of, call it a workshop, call it training programs, because one of the problems which I found over the years is that South African informal traders lack competitiveness when it comes to the foreign traders. And thereby, I hear a lot of people saying that the South Africans are lazy, and that is why they are not able to do ABCD, which I disagree. Now, the point is that the reason why people take it from that perspective, that the South Africans are lazy, is because people refuse to understand that the upbringing of two different families, of two different kids from two different family backgrounds, makes a whole lot of difference in their growing up and their upbringing. Now, most of the foreign traders come from a background of business enterprise or business entrepreneurship. But the South Africans, they didn't come from that background. They came straight from the struggle, trying to survive, trying to get their feet, and trying to make a difference in their life from where they're coming from. And then you throw them deep into the business sector, which they don't have idea of how it works. That is why people are not giving attention or notice to the fact that if the city council comes out and draw a yellow line on the pavement and allocate 50 of those demarcations for the locals to put their tables and do their businesses, whatever form of business they want to do, for them to pay 150 Rand a month to trade in those spaces. They will trade there for about a month or two. And then by the 4th to 5th, 6th month, a foreign trader will come and offer them 5,000 Rand for the same spot, where they are making 200, 300, 400 Rand a day. And then they take the 5,000 Rand, they sell the spot to them, and they take over the business. In about a year or two, when you come back, the whole 50 slots given to the locals is occupied by foreign traders. Do we ever ask ourselves, why is it like that? I think that is where the problem lies. Let's address this problem from the roots, because if you push the foreign traders away and give the space to the locals, come back a year's time, the whole space will be sold again back to the foreign traders. So why not we do a workshop where you train the local traders, teach them how to manage their business, how to do the business, because they have got no idea what to do with those businesses. They have got no idea how to manage the fund. Government will give them loan, 5,000, 20,000 to start a micro business. Within 6 months to 1 year, the money runs out. It's not because they are lazy. It's not because they like to spend the money. It's because they don't know how to manage the micro business for it to grow and become bigger. So they need workshop to teach them how to do business in the street, how to do business in the little talk shop and grow and become bigger. You see, so that is the problem. So I think we need to start to tackle this problem from the roots instead of cutting it from the top, because the problem will still continue tomorrow unless they find a broom and sweep all foreigners out of South Africa and then let them take over where they want to stay. But if you don't teach them the skills on how to manage those businesses on the street, it will never come right. I think that is just the most important thing, and Stephen raised that point. I just want to elaborate on it so that we understand where to start this problem from, or where to start solving this problem, so that if we want to solve it, we solve it once and for all. Put a foreign trader and a local trader side by side. Within 6 months, come back there, give them the same amount of money. The foreign trader will triple the business, and the local trader, the business will fizzle out. It's not because he is lazy, it's because he lacks the technical know-how. So try and create a workshop where you teach them what to do, educate them not to be antagonistic toward these foreign traders, but let's stick close to them and learn the trade, learn how to manage, learn what to do to grow, so that tomorrow, if you are better than the next foreign trader, it's easy for you to push him out. He will run away by himself because you are outshining him in the business sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Prince. Thank you. I'm not sure, Kali, is your signal back up? No, it doesn't look like it. Madam President, I'm going to give you the last words in terms of closing tonight's session. This is officially the longest SAITA Straight Talk session that we've had since its inception. But what a worthy topic to warrant the time spent on it.
Thank you, Louise, and thank you to all the panelists for the input. And I think, as Stephen has said, it's dialogue, it's collaboration that is going to give us the answers. So I'd like to say to government, as the overarching authority in these matters, that we should work together, collaborate for the best solutions. And Prince, thank you for bringing that up, because that is very, very real as well. But until next time, let's see you on Straight Talk.
Thank you so much, Resida. Thank you very, very much
you.
to Stephen, Pat, Prince, and Kali. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for tuning in. Remember, this session of SAITA Straight Talk will be available on the Facebook page as well as on our YouTube channel. Please share it far and wide and make sure that those that you know also follow the SAITA Media Facebook channel. From me, Louise, until next time, good night.